Apart from aliens dropping a mega virus on the planet, completely overwhelming us like in War of the Worlds, or just in general releasing a super predator that would quickly take over the planet as the top species because nothing works on them, a lot of people have probably wondered, what would happen if an alien invasion took place during our current era and scale of technology, and how would our militaries actually fare against such creatures? Well, one of the interesting aspects of this is, what exactly do you do against them? Humans have gotten extremely efficient in taking one another out over the last 100,000 years. From hand to spears, to arrows, to swords, to muskets, to splitting the atom to vaporize everything. We pretty much mastered it at this point, and we really do just like destroying one another. But during the events of Battle LA, after a meteor shower takes place all over the world, and then those meteors actually end up hitting near coastal cities, an invasion would arrive on the shores of specifically California and then numerous other countries to annihilate the native population and take Earth's most precious resource. The question the militaries would face, however, is how do you stop these things? Hailing from a different planet means different physiology, bodily needs, and in general, a lack of organs that we have come to know to be important to life. So in today's episode, we will be discussing the movie Battle LA and the aliens that have descended from the sky, along with their possible origins and why they chose Earth, a heavily populated planet of all places to attack. So as per usual, up on screen, you will see a timestamp. If you want to head there, you can bypass a summary of this movie and then head straight into sort of like the lore and science of this. But for everyone else, let's find out why Sergeant Johnson's statement of "we've all run the simulations, they're tough, but they ain't invincible" applies to these alien bastards. We open up our story to a bunch of chatter from the media, because you know, as they always do, nowadays they just can't seem to shut up about anything, but it's clear from what we are seeing that the military is engaging with something. Cities across the planet are under siege. A military officer talks about how this is a textbook military invasion as a group of soldiers are sent in a helicopter across an open war zone, as Los Angeles does not appear to be doing so hot. 24 hours earlier than this, we meet Staff Sergeant Michael Nance running along the beach. As he does, he starts getting passed by younger soldiers. He heads to his car to ice his knees, and oh god, I felt that. So just for your information, avoid 400-pound plus squats in high school. You will be feeling it around your 30s. Anyways, it's clear that he's older and likely about 3 weeks from retirement. As he drives along in his, I'm fairly certain this is a 1965 Mustang, pretty quality year. He's hearing reports about the meteorites touching down in the oceans tomorrow morning. As he heads in, Nance has done his 20 years in the military and he's ready to get out at this point. So actually, he's like an hour from retirement. So now things are picking up about the meteors. The scientists of Earth didn't detect them until recently, despite usually them being able to detect these things months or even years out. So not important, but we get to meet a ton of soldiers who likely won't make it. Lockett goes out to visit his brother's gravesite, and in general, the soldiers are really just getting ready for like some sort of wedding before their deployment to Iraq. The next morning, the meteors have landed off the coast of 20 different countries, and the United States is up on the chopping block too. Out at the desert military training area, a few Humvees arrive to pull all the soldiers back to base. Nance is supposed to be getting out of there, but then is dragged back with them despite his protesting, as the whole base is being mobilized to deal with the meteors off the coast. Nance is being assigned to a new platoon as the original staff sergeant is on leave. Already, the group doesn't trust him because during his last tour in Iraq, it really just kind of went bad. And also, I know I'm supposed to say Iraq, but it's just my accent. It's Iraq. Apart from that, everyone is getting geared up to go out there as the meteors begin landing in the water. They are all briefed that the objects are slowing down before impact and that they are mechanical, not natural, meaning that something is touching down on the planet apart from normal rock. As they watch footage of the impacts, ships are being destroyed, and as they continue to look at the destroyers being just turned over, creatures begin attacking the beaches and civilians. One of the soldiers hypothesizes that these are extraterrestrial, while another talks about how they are from Canada. I mean, obviously, a fair summation. So the helicopter ride over is pretty turbulent, mainly because there's an entire battle going on below them. As they arrive at Santa Monica Airport, this is going to be their forward operating base. As they are briefed, the platoon is told that most of the civilians have been evacuated, but there are still some inside a police station, and their job is to get them out. There is a defensive line a mile from the ocean, which will be definitely held, as for now, the aliens do not appear to have air support. Because of this, at 19:30 or 7:30 p.m., Santa Monica will be leveled by a bombardment to destroy the invaders. Their main goal is to take out anything not human, because humanity number one, baby! As they run past the civilians, the entire city is now engulfed in smoke and aliens, and they can hear something in the distance, but it doesn't sound like human tech. Walking down the street, they begin to hear movement around them, along with guttural noises as well. The dog runs out of the smoke, and they assume, oh, it's just a dog, but not really, because then the aliens open up on them. As now you might have guessed, a massive firefight ensues that presumably annihilated the civilians not long ago. And man, some of these things are like brutal. They start grabbing soldiers and then pulling them into foliage, but before they can get completely overwhelmed, they move into a nearby house for cover, and with all the wounded they can grab. One soldier is then shot in the leg as he hobbles along into a laundry room. Locking himself in, he calls back to his platoon, but as he does, one of the creatures walks past him. Nance then gathers up a few others to go and find him. As the soldier exits the laundry room, one of the creatures comes up from the pool, but its weapon jams before it can get a shot off. As the others in the group arrive, the alien bursts out of the water again, and they drop a grenade in it and blow up the alien. But not before the laundry soldier freaks out, saying that they don't die. They do, they're just tough. Back out at the road, the platoon ends up spotting what's left of a strike group from the Air Force and a few other Army National Guard. Finding the police station, they burst in to find the civilians, but it's looking pretty screwed overall. The place was obviously already attacked, but they do manage to find a few hiding in the corner. As the chopper lands to evacuate the wounded, they try to get the civilians on it, but now it's just overweight, so they can't really do anything. But here's the problem. The aliens now have air support, and it's faster than the chopper. All the soldiers on the helicopter were decimated in one hit from the alien tech. The soldiers at this point are starting to break down a bit, seeing as the platoon is being systematically destroyed. The plan now is to fall back to the FOB. The media says that it's the safest place for now, but is it though? Guess we will find out. As the soldiers on the roof are watching from afar on the police station, a few of the aliens are being dropped onto rooftops. Back in the station, a doctor is talking about how they are here for resources as no demands have been made. So the aliens are really just there to annihilate the local population, that being humanity. They now devise a plan. No chopper is coming for them, so they will need to commandeer a bus to get the civilians out of there. While two run out to accomplish this, another soldier runs back in and says they found an alien's body. As they approach it, they can hear the military's radio chatter, seeing that these things have been listening for the whole time. Why they wouldn't suspect an advanced form of life would know about radio signals is beyond me. As they look at it, they find that the weapons have been surgically attached, and it seems to be wearing some sort of exosuit. As it moves, they put a round in its presumed head, but it does absolutely nothing. Dragging it back inside, the staff sergeant has an idea. Rather than waste all their ammo, they need to figure out where to hit these things to bring them down for good. Luckily for them, one of the civilians is a vet, so the idea is maybe like the same rules of life apply out there as they apply here. As they pull back its chest plate, it doesn't look like anything they have ever seen. Checking for a brain, they can't find anything within the brain case either, and considering it just took a round to the brain case, there's obviously nothing there that's controlling the body. As they continue to cut into the creature, the aliens from the roof have now moved down into the street. The two soldiers in the bus are getting it running, and the aliens are now breaching the police station. Things move fast. The two soldiers then get the bus moving and are headed back towards the police station. Eventually, Nance is able to find something that looks like a heart and then stabs it, and he's able to take out the creature. So basically, where the heart is on a human, fire right there. Although it is encased in like a crazy amount of bone and flesh, but now that they know this, they can actually do some damage to these creatures. Everyone gets loaded onto the bus, but they are forced to take side roads to avoid major conflict. But they figure they can get into the FOB in about 30 minutes, but the Air Force is leveling the area in 40 minutes, so they're cutting it rather close. As they drive along, they begin to hear the noise that sounds different from the rest of the random alien noises that they've been hearing. As one soldier calls in with the radio, the ships that were flying overhead has one of them stop and then is able to listen to the broadcast of the soldier talking. Realizing the bus is going to be found, Nance then runs off to the gas station to attract the ship. As the ship goes to investigate the radio noise, he blows up the gas station, which destroys the ship in the process. But as Nance goes to check on the pilot of the ship to see if it is being piloted, he realizes that there is no pilot. It's all automated warfare apart from ground troops. As the back roads are blocked due to basically cars being in the way and rubble, their only option now is to take the highway. As they drive along, they're ambushed again, but there is a tank drawing fire from the enemies, so wrong place, wrong time. I mean, probably those enemies would have just not even noticed had the tank not been there. But the tank gets blown up, leaving them to fight the aliens. The plan now is to get everyone off the bridge while they hold off the aliens. So this firefight, just so you know, goes on for like a long time, but eventually the aliens bring in the heavy firepower, which ends up completely decimating a large portion of the platoon that was left. The lieutenant at this point is also injured, and then he elects to stay behind with the C4 to detonate it using his radio to attract the creatures and then blowing them up. So now the staff sergeant's in control of this entire operation. They are still inside of the area that is supposed to be destroyed, and there's no way they're getting to the FOB in time now. Also not mega important, but one of the civilians picked up a rifle during the fight and actually ended up taking some out, but then got shot in the guts. Not an ideal hit. Something like that gives you about, I don't know, 20-30 minutes of life. The media though is still somehow functional, thank God. It comes out that the aliens are there for the water and that they are using it for fuel. The ocean levels all over the planet are dropping already, which is like an insane amount of water. As everyone sits there crowding in the basement of the building, they are waiting for the Air Force to level the area, but nothing happens. They wonder if they are winning or maybe if the whole Air Force was taken out. Getting to the FOB, yep, the whole Air Force was taken out. town. Entering the base, they start looking for maps, or really anything they can find to where everyone went. Also, the civilian has bitten the dust at this point, so morale is getting kind of low. Because of this, Lockett finally makes his move on the staff sergeant. The whole platoon is upset at Nance because of Iraq. Nance then rectifies this misconception by repeating who every person was that was lost to show that he still does remember them. And, that finally shuts up Lockett, which, I get it, but anyways, it doesn't really matter because it affirms his role as leader. Nance gets on the radio and calls out, which definitely does alert the aliens, but then they get out of there. But he gets information on where to fall back to. They get into an LAV-25 because apparently during the Tomorrow War video, calling a C-130 a B-52 is likened to like heresy of the highest order. So there you go, you absolute machine nerds. Regardless of that, they enter a tunnel full of aliens and then just straight start running down everything with the LAV-25, or is it LAV-25? Somebody in the comments is gonna say something, I already know it. Anyways, they meet up with a chopper and get the civilians out, where then they are told that they are abandoning Los Angeles. As they fly along though, an EMP blast hits. They don't know what it is, but something has been screwing with the power all day, as they are told by the pilots. Looking down, they see a blacked out area amongst all the powered areas. Nance requests to land, but they don't have the power to take off again. He then just asks to hover at 40 feet and goes down to recon, and then is joined by the rest of his platoon, probably because of his amp-up speech from earlier. Nance then asks Air Force where she thinks that this thing would be hidden, and she says that it's supposed to be underground. Seeing as the surface is crawling with aliens, they then move into the sewer system. A firefight ensues for just a few seconds because it was just a small patrol. As Nance looks through a hole in the wall, he finds the aliens' forward operating base and how they've been coordinating their attacks and keeping their ships air. Moving back to the surface, they now devise a plan to destroy it. One of the soldiers ascends a destroyed building to call in the strike on the control center. He gets confirmation that it will take about 3 minutes. As he turns around to get off the tower though, a ship blows up the tower, taking him out. So again, a firefight ensues as they keep the target painted for the airstrike. As one of the shots comes in, it knocks out the top of the control center, and this makes the rest of the control center upsetty spaghetti as it attempts to nope out of there. As it does, they call in another strike while the attack continues on them. As another missile comes in, it's taken out by some cannon fodder. Nance then goes in to aim it with a painter, as I don't know what that thing is called, and then gets a direct hit on the control center, blowing it out of the sky. As he does this, nothing is controlling the drones anymore, but the ground troops are still up. They're able to then drive them back and then take the remnants of the control center, giving the military a chance to take back Los Angeles. As everyone is then brought back to base, they are told that they are good to rest now. Nance then begins reloading to head back out and beat some alien cheeks, or whatever equivalent that they have. This really is sort of like an all hands on deck scenario, although I wonder if they have like something floating around in space that might just totally jack up the planet if they lose. So I believe the first place we should start with these creatures is to first understand what their goal even is and where they are from. In the events of Battle LA, we were told very little about these invaders, what they're doing, where they are from, why they are here, and why they chose Earth of all places. There was a postulation that they were here using our liquid water for fuel, but come on now, is that really it? You could literally, like, if you're using water as fuel, why not stop at one of the moons around Jupiter and just take all that water? Then they're like, oh, it's because it's liquid water. Well, there's supposedly liquid water underneath the ice. I don't know. But because honestly, we are seeing them spit up water when Nance was trying to stab it to figure out how to actually end these creatures, kind of suggests something else. So let's start from the beginning, because believe it or not, there actually is extensive lore on these creatures. It honestly could have been a better movie if they kind of just dove into this a little more. First thing to know about the alien menace is that they are basically unnamed, but that never stopped humanity from naming the unnamed. They get referred to as Greys, which is clearly a callback to what we call every alien ever, pretty much, big eyes, short stature, gray skin, something that humans have been writing about for a very long time. We also call them Chigs, Aquoids, and Landsharks as well. Now, I think the name that fits them the best is Landsharks, simply because they're creepy and on land, and they sort of look like sharks too. So that's going to be the name I stick with throughout this video. Concerning the Landsharks' reason for spreading amongst the cosmos, this is pure lore portion because we see it nowhere in the movie, but it explains their motives. They are a highly intelligent species with varying members and castes. They are said to not be the dominant force on their planet either. So much so that another force that exists has really driven them into a losing war, and they are being pushed off the planet. Due to their need for water and their biology, which we will be kind of going over shortly, it's assumed that they hail from a watery planet and are dependent upon water as well. Because of their war and the watery planet, it is assumed to be rather war-torn, and they are being pushed to the fringes of their last oceans and seas from whatever the more dominant force is on their planet, which, considering how smart these aliens are on their own, is an interesting aspect to think about concerning a planet producing producing two possible sapient creatures, or possibly it could be something else, but that is unless it is simply within their own species. There are just two warring factions, both coming from this group, which if humanity is anything to go off of, is definitely a possibility. Within the military, there are varying castes which can be seen throughout the battle for Los Angeles if you look close enough. These range from combative roles to non-combat roles. The first caste that we have seen and are the first to arrive from the oceans, which is going to be your standard infantry caste. This caste stands roughly 8 feet 1 inches tall, or about 2.4 meters, but as a result, they are thinner. Their mechanical components are more aggressive concerning their bodies, which is a fair indicator as to why they are as tall as they are. On top of this, their body appears to be stretched out over these mechanical pieces, which has made them thinner in the process. It is hypothesized that roughly about 25 million of these warriors are in existence within the meteorite cluster that led the invasion of Earth. This particular caste has a large amount of redundancies concerning biology, such as arteries, bones, different sensory organs, because they have been bred for war with almost any species, which we will go into later in greater detail, because as this specific caste, the human warriors spend most of their time fighting them. These creatures have also had their original hands replaced with a cannon for explosive tactics and a fast repeating force multiplier, but it's also fairly inaccurate. The one who leads the warriors is known as the officer caste. These ones are easier to distinguish from others due to their sheer size. While being incredibly lanky and frail looking, they stand at 9 feet 4 inches, or roughly about 2.8 meters. These officers are said to have more developed brains than the warriors and also excellent eyesight, allowing them to spot human soldiers on the rooftops above the police station easily and direct their warriors to begin the attack. It is hypothesized that roughly 2 million of these creatures exist within the invasion force. The bodies of these creatures are even more so altered than those of the warrior caste. Implanting in their bodies, they have access to radios, which gives them an edge over humans, as they can tune into our radio frequencies to discover where a soldier may be hiding based on signal strength. Essentially, it's entirely possible they may actually feel the radio signals in their body. Concerning alterations to their body, their legs have been completely replaced and are equipped with thrusters, allowing them to hover and move about without the need for physical contact with the ground. This will give them a bird's eye view of the battlefield, and this coupled with their eyesight allows them to direct effectively. These thrusters also allow them to move quickly at speeds of up to 25 miles per hour, or roughly 40 kilometers per hour. Their upper limbs have also been replaced, with their right hand becoming a new cannon for more focused, accurate fire, and their left hand becoming a mechanical claw. The third caste is known as the operations caste and is a blending of the two aforementioned castes. This creature is specifically chosen to take on specialized tasks and strike missions. Standing at 6 feet 11 inches or 2.1 meters, they are not as strong as warriors, nor are they as intelligent as officers. However, they are stronger than officers and more intelligent than warriors, giving them the ability to understand who's a target, plan ambushes on their own, and lure human soldiers into protracted combat. It is hypothesized that roughly 2 million to 8 million exist of this Landshark variant. On their right arm, they have a force multiplier that can be used for greater accuracy purposes, as they appear to prefer rooftops and the cover of smoke. Along with this, their left hand has been unchanged, which allows them to signal to one another to not give away their positions to humans who are likely below them. The final combat caste role is known as the intelligence caste, and likely is the closest to the original version of this species. This creature averages about 5 feet 10 inches or roughly 1.7 meters and are the most normal looking variant of this species. While clearly changed in a lot of mechanical ways like the rest of them, they are the shortest and stockiest of the Landsharks, whose intelligence is quite high. They do not have the integrated force multiplication system, and as a result, they have both of their original hands used for grasping. They can operate machinery and vehicles due to their ability to grasp objects, and likely have toned down versions of redundancies in their bodies as compared to the warrior caste. As with combat, there are non-combative roles as well, which give us some idea of how these creatures may actually form ideas and opinions on one another. They do not by any means appear to be calloused drones doing the bidding of some queen, but instead appear to be a society of some sort which cares about one another, much like how humans do. No more apparent is this than with the medic caste. It is hypothesized that possibly this may be actually just a crossing over of the intel class, but should one of their own get injured in combat, they will drag their wounded away to safety. But this opens up an interesting idea that also gives us some explanation on possibly the evolution of these creatures, with just a simple act of these creatures helping their wounded. With bred organisms, specifically bred for combat, it's easy to get the idea that they're just mindless beasts out there fighting for some unknown goal. Otherwise, why wouldn't they have just, tried to talk to us first? Well, this indicates that these creatures are likely desperate for resources and have no option but to invade and use shock and awe tactics. Concerning their evolution, it looks like they may have actually evolved under the same principles as Homo sapiens did. It's not all that common, believe it or not, for a species to actually individually care for one another of its own kind. Sure, there are examples here and there that we see, sort of like a lion facing off against a group of hyenas where other lions come to its aid, or dogs staying near their owners who are injured and then growling at people trying to actually help, or bears defending their cubs from other bears or other predators. But the reality is, most animals are really only concerned with their own well-being for the most part. Homo sapiens is strange in that aspect. We have taken care of our injured and sick more often than not. It's shown in combat that we will drag our wounded or even dead away from enemies, and if it goes with our morals, we typically stick our necks out for one another. All in all, while we may be complete asses to each other sometimes, as a species we do try. And then cue the naysayers who go, actually, given our current time, which, nah brah. Despite there being lines drawn, which is like every person ever, and this is always going to be the case with humans, as a species we still do have loyalties to some who we would do stuff like this for. So the whole idea has been ingrained in us for quite some time, ever since we picked up a rock and hurled it at larger predators that may be attacking our own. This idea has turned the tides on stronger animals because as we band together, we are able to more effectively defend our species. The same idea can be applied to the landsharks, which has resulted in their own success on their own planet. And coming from a water planet, there's likely no shortage of predators in their ocean. Because of this, for them to become as technologically successful as they have, they would need to band together to give themselves enough strength to resist predators to allow them to grow and be viable on their planets. And given what we do know about their biology, they certainly are not the strongest nor most capable on their planet, given what's in our own oceans, as sort of like a comparison, which means they would be forced to socially interact to move forward. But speaking of biology, what do we know about them? Well, surprisingly very little from the under fire autopsy that they did on that one warrior that they brought back from the outside of the police station. But we do know what the original species is supposed to look like, and based on that, we can more accurately see how aggressively they have changed themselves, likely out of desperation. The original species is technically quadrupedal, having 6 limbs in total. On the lower portion of their bodies, they have 4 limbs, 2 that bend in the front to form front legs, and 2 that bend in the back to form back legs. This would be imperative having, being in the ocean, considering that strong currents exist, and this would allow them to walk within the water and plant themselves in place to resist the effects of strong currents, whereas with humans, you would basically just be swept away because you can't provide enough counter pressure effectively with 2 legs. The top 2 limbs form grasping limbs, which likely early in their evolution would have been a great boon to their species, much like with ours, for crafting things like spears or generally using tools, which because these creatures are water-based organisms, having 4 limbs would allow them to be able to push water to the side and also swim. Internally, the biology of these creatures would match the warrior caste in a lot of ways, but likely there are some stark differences concerning survivability. The landsharks do not exist with the same structuring of organs that we have. Their heads are really just sensory organs which report to the brain further down. The head consists of eyes, the ability to hear and also communicate. Their mouths are actually just structures that vibrate, which allow them to speak to one another, which also gives credence to the fact that they exist on a water planet, as vibrational waves sent out in this way would travel further and better in water than it would in air. But they're still able to make noise in air, but then you have to wonder, does it sound distorted and strange, sort of like when people talk underwater? Regardless, this is the reason why headshots seem ineffective against the warrior caste, because while you are taking away their ability to sort of like sense around them if hit directly, you haven't really destroyed the brain or the heart yet. The head is also altered by the presence of a metal enclosure in some areas, which would presumably house the radios for them to communicate and protection of those sensory organs. On top of the metallic structures seen throughout the body, we also know that they have exoskeletons. These exoskeletons may hint at an insectoid evolutionary pathway that over time resulted in these creatures. On our own planet, the Permian-Triassic extinction event almost wiped out the insects, along with pretty much almost everything in the ocean, and given time on another planet without this extinction event, it's possible that insects may have evolved to the level of intellect that humans have obtained, and this resulted in the landsharks. This exoskeleton allows them to survive direct shots and has been noted to be on par with Kevlar vests, which also makes it very difficult to pierce with a bayonet, which we have seen in close quarters fighting at the control center. But internally, they also seem to possess many stem cells, and with that, the ability to grow limbs. And this also points to the insectoid lineage, as on this planet, if insects lose a leg, a larval leg will then sprout and mature over time, allowing them to regain functionality, again, making these creatures incredibly successful combatants. But back to the internals, further down into the chest is where the brain and heart are housed, which ever since I was a kid, I've always wondered why we didn't have our brains center mass, considering it's such an important organ. Being close to the heart would sort of be like a no-brainer, but instead our head is located on a delicate outcropping of bone and muscle that can be just straight hit. I've just always thought it was sort of bizarre, but landsharks do not struggle with this problem. Sensory neurons then run down through their necks, likely indicating that there is a vertebral column, which means that these are chordate animals. And this is what makes the creature so difficult to put down. Now, likely in the original version of this species, there is a chamber center mass that will house the brain of these creatures, which, considering that they do not need lungs like humans do, would allow room for this to exist. And within this sac exists the heart as well, or at least within the thoracic cavity. And this would allow for the outer body to protect this cavity, and within this cavity, another layer of protection would protect the brain and important organs. This is why the ammo used by human soldiers has such a tough time penetrating it. On the original species, it likely would have been easier to put down these creatures, but the warrior caste was likely bred with desirable traits for combat, and this has been instilled in them, making them tougher to put down. And this is also why for things like intelligence and likely officers, they are more easily downed in combat as the covering isn't quite as thick. In operations, specifically the one that jumps out of the pool, his arm force multiplier jammed, allowing the soldiers to get a shot off, but these likely missed the brain of this creature until the whole platoon showed up and then lit the alien up, destroying the brain in the process. The warriors, again, have the same set as all the others, but when Nance was trying to crack into it, the creature began spitting up water until they pulled back the covering to reveal a beating organ in the brain. So now the question is, why did this creature spit water up? Well, seeing as this landshark, again, is from a water planet, the gills would have been for filtering oxygen, which may be the apparatus that we see on its back, which serves as a cooling system as well. It would be pretty clear that the oxygen is from the air, which it likely is oxygen that it is using, because nitrogen is a chemically inert gas, meaning that it doesn't react with other gases, making it borderline useless for metabolism. So if it is going to be on this planet, it must be playing by this planet's rules and then using the oxygen available. And this water then starts running through the body, and this is what's being pumped through its body as well, meaning that it may not have blood in a conventional sense to carry its oxygen, but is actually utilizing dissolved oxygen in water to power its cells. And destroying this pump, just like destroying the heart, would stop oxygen from getting to the brain, which in turn ends the landshark. The bodies, apart from the internal changes, are also heavily altered as well, and we can see in a lot of them their meat suits are quite literally stretched to capacity depending on need, which leads to a more slender looking landshark, and then all the way to those who are actually similar to their original forms and are much more stockier as a result, as seen with the intelligence class. But likely these added exoskeletons are quite important. This may have actually been their downfall, however, or it contributed to their downfall. This may explain why they were pushed out of their planet in the first place. Judging by their prowess towards altering their own bodies, this would be necessary for them to do to not only invade other worlds due to their differences in gravity, or even supporting their own bodies, considering living in water doesn't necessarily transfer to standing on land, but it may also show what they are fighting. Now, take this with a grain of salt because this isn't confirmed, but considering that they are a sapient species on a planet, while a species can cohabitate on that planet at the same time, such as Homo sapiens did with Homo neanderthalensis, usually one wins out over the other as technological levels increase, possibly in one before the other and at a faster rate. This may indicate that these creatures with their technology have been yeeted off their planet, but possibly, bear with me, due to what we see with their bodies and the machines altering, they may have actually just created machines in general. Considering the lengths they are going to actually alter their own physiology to fight something on their planet must mean that this is likely a extinction level event. And I just don't see how another species existing over where the landsharks have this much tech, such as with space travel capabilities. What I do see is them being the masters of their own downfall. Sort of like the path that we are on if we don't stop screwing around with AI. So then they have to abandon their planet and seek out water resources elsewhere to survive, knowing that they have nothing to go back to. And this would explain the aggression that they have towards any other planet with water and a native population. Of course, they must not know humanity very well, because this invasion would ultimately be a dismal failure. While using the shock and awe technique to overwhelm the primate race, humans are cunning, and rather than specializing like the landsharks did, we're actually sort of a jack of all trades species. Destroying the control center allowed for the military to re-enter Los Angeles and also let us relay to the rest of the world pretty much how to take out the landsharks. After 18 months of fighting disorganized landsharks, humanity eliminated the threat from the west coast, or ended up just capturing capturing the rest of their enemies, leading to a better understanding of these creatures along with their technology. You know, had they kind of just shown up and asked to swim around the ocean, probably nobody would have really cared as long as they didn't overfish. Or hell, just set up the colony on the coast and trade, but showing up and getting your face stomped in is another great option. To conclude, I believe this species is one that is insectoid in origin. Over time, it was able to adapt better to its surroundings and due to its social ability, would band together with its own species to create a technology. Also, take a shot every time I said species. You'll die. But this is why they had to flee their home planet and why they are so aggressive now in such low numbers, because they are knowing that they are about to go extinct. And this may be because either there was a rival species on their home planet or because they created a machine race which is giving them complete hell. Either way, in the immortalized words of Will Smith when he punches an alien in the face on Independence Day, welcome to Earth.